All right, since we just mentioned the existence of something called doubling, let's spend some time and talk about what doubling is. Um, Doubling, as in to double something, is something that we have to do very often when we're working in these four voiced settings. Because our triads, unless you're working with the seventh chord, which you can but are not always, and you could say most of the time are not, our triads only have three notes, but we have four voices. So some note in this chord has to be doubled. For example, in this particular case here, the root is doubled. We have two different C's, right? And then an E and a G. So the root is being doubled by the tenor, or you could say is being doubled by the bass. But in this case, I would say the bass is doubled. It doesn't really matter. But what does matter is that the root of the chord is the note that's being doubled in this case. Okay? So there's a lot of rules for how to double something, how to decide what note gets doubled. So let's talk about, let's go over just kind of the general rules first, and then we'll look at an example in the next video. Okay, so rule number one about doubling. Never double the note that has an accidental on it or is a tendency note. So if you have a leading tone in a chord, don't double the leading tone. If there's a note that's kind of exceptionally dissonant, and we want that dissonance in the chord, but we don't want to emphasize it by doubling it, right? So let's say you're in a minor key and you've got that a leading tone in it, like in this case. Like if we were doing a four-voiced thing here, I would not want to double that A because it's a tendency tone going up to this B flat. It's a leading tone. That would not sound very good to double that note. I still want it there. I just don't want to double it. Okay, next rule. If you're in root position, if you're making a chord in root position, double the root. Pretty safe bet. So if we're in root position, that means that the root of the chord is in the bass. So the bass note is what's going to get doubled somewhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the tenor like this. You know, we could have a setting that's something like this. That kind of works. That actually works kind of well. So in this case, we're still obeying that rule. The root is the note that's doubled. We have two different C's. And then we have the G and the E. Okay, so if we're in root position, double the root. Okay, next rule. If you're in first position, meaning the third is in the bass, let's do one of those. Let's just make one. So let's stick to our C minor chord here. So that's going to put an E in the bass. Oops. There we go. So let's just fill out the chord really quick. So we have an E, C, and a G. Okay, so what are we going to do next? The rule says in first position, you can double any chord member as long as it's not a tendency tone. So as long as it's not a leading tone or it has an accidental or something like that on it. Doubling whatever is in the soprano is generally a good idea. So since I have nothing left to do here except the soprano, let's put a C here. Because now what I've done is I have whatever's in the soprano here is doubled. And that's not a really strict rule that you have to double the soprano if we're in first position. First inversion, you can kind of get away with doubling anything as long as it makes sense with voice leading, which we'll talk more about later. So this case works. I have E, C, G, C. I have the root doubled in this case. Okay, if we're in second position, meaning the fifth is in the bass, let's just do that and see if that works. The rule here for second position is double the bass. double whatever's in the bass, and if we're in second position, or second inversion, I mean, it's going to be the fifth. So we're going to double the fifth. So here's the bass note. So what I have here is I have the root doubled. That doesn't work well. We want to double the fifth because we're in second inversion. So I need to find something that I can move to a G. Probably the best way to do it would be that. Now I have two Gs, 2 of the fifth, which is what I want to do in second inversion. So those are our main rules. If you're doing like a diminished triad, normally you would double the bass. In a diminished triad, you would normally double whatever you have in the bass note, which is usually the third. But we'll talk more about that later, because I think diminished triads, how you voice those, has a lot to do with the voice leading. So when I use that phrase, how we voice something, what I'm talking about is this: how we're stacking the root, third, and fifth of the chord, what gets doubled. That is called the voicing of it, the order of the notes. And that's what we're going to be working with. Okay, so that's what doubling is and how it works. It's something that you have to pay attention to because it's going to affect the sound of it kind of a lot in this style. So let's jump to a new video and let's look at an example song.